Annie Proulx is here. She is the author of the Pulitzer Prize-winning The Shipping News. In her new collection of short stories, Close Range, she uses Wyoming to describe the brutal world of rodeo riders, ranchers, and farmers looking for a little dignity in life. The book is already receiving rave reviews, and the leading story in the collection has been selected by John Updike as one of the best American short stories of the century. I'm pleased to have her here at this table. Welcome.
I'm pleased to be here, out of the rain.
Out of
the snow.
When you think of all the places you have lived and worked, I mean, are you happiest in Wyoming?
Yeah. Wyoming's my writing place. It's just a totally charged place. You go into it, and it's almost as though you were trailing a little cord behind you and plugged into the side of the mountain.
Yeah, I have a friend who lives actually in Jackson, which you consider a different part than Wyoming you live in. But he gets up in the morning, and he takes a camera, and he just goes out, and he shoots all day, and he comes back in. And that's what he does. I mean, he's an Easterner who's so captivated by the country.
It's quite extraordinary. It's like you're standing there with your mouth open all the time. It's big country, it's exciting, interesting, vigorous country, and you walk, you climb, you just can't help yourself. It's a great place.
Do you think the natives are different because they're shaped by this sort of the sharpness of the land?
Yes, I think that's true of all rural places anyway, that what's there in terms of climate, what's there in terms of the way the wind blows, the geology, the geography, how you make a living, who was there before you, all orders your life in a way that urban and suburban lives rarely are ordered these days. So you find yourself in a kind of a massive story that you can't help.
I'm struck by the notion of how it might enhance your powers of observation because of it.
Well, long sight lines, when you can stand at your kitchen sink and look out the window and see 100 miles down the road, that's something. That long sight line combined with walking shifts your thoughts into a different way. It's almost literally like the closed horizon that you get in the east and the south from masses of greenery and walls and houses and so forth. It's all gone, and it opens wider and wider, and you're on the beam.
But is there any reason to believe that you, with the skills that you have developed and the craft that you have, would be any different, right? That the power of observation you have could do the same thing for an urban life?
I don't think so. I'm at home in a rural situation, and all of my writing has been about rural places. And this is something that really interests me, what writers handle an urban scene in a novel well, so that the story moves through the urban landscape. And, of course, the striking one is Ulysses. Yeah. And a very, very fine example of it in this country is Joyce Carol Oates' What I Lived For, which in this Union City, New Jersey, that she describes, has got this entrepreneurial fellow whose whole life is moving through the architecture, the old nightclub, the old athletic club. It's a beautiful job. That's the most successful American landscape urban novel that I know. It's a beautiful piece of work. Hard to do.
She lives in Princeton, doesn't she? I think she lives in Princeton.
She teaches there.
Yeah,
so she probably does nearby. Close
right. Let me come back to this, and we'll come back to other writers. This scene comes from
William Matthews, the painter, whom I met at the Cowboy Poetry Gathering a couple years ago in Elko, Nevada. Painted the cover and the inside illustrations. Really, this is the first piece of illustrated adult fiction Scribner has published in 60 years.
The first piece of...
the first novel, fiction, illustrated fiction.
Illustrated fiction.
How did I say it? It sounded rather peculiar.
Yeah, it did. But
adult fiction, right.
Exactly, but we got it. Yeah. This is the first piece of fiction that they have illustrated.
Yes, correct.
And was that your idea?
No, it was Willie's idea. We had a good time hanging out in Elko and went to dinner at a great Basque restaurant there, and there were just a lot of...
Basque?
Basque.
Is there a Basque contingent?
In Nevada, there's a very large one,
right.
yes. Wherever you find sheep you'll find Basques.
Yes.
And there are lots of them in Wyoming and also
Yeah, I
in
knew
Nevada.
there was in Nevada, right?
Right. There's a great restaurant in Elko, the Star, I think it is. Great big long tables covered with oilcloth, and you sit next to perfect strangers. No table is smaller than seating 16.
Yeah.
So I ran into Willie a couple of weeks later by chance in Denver, several hundred miles away. He said, "Gee, if you ever write anything about the West, I'd like to do the cover for it." And I said I'd fly it past my publisher, and they were pleased. And then next time I said, "I not only like to do the cover, I'd like to do some inside illustrations."
Yeah.
Well, Willie, they don't illustrate books anymore.
But just look at, can I show some of these? We'll show them better. But look at this. I mean, these are really...
They're quite marvelous.
Oh, yeah.
And it did turn into a true collaboration because I changed some of the stories to suit...
To suit the illustration?
Yeah, and he changed some of the illustrations. I think he had to repaint that one you just went past with the girl with the tractor.
What a great...
He first painted a red Fordson tractor, which he said had beautiful bones, but it didn't fit the story, so we had to go back and do a John Deere.
Yeah. John Deere's are always green, and Fords were always red, right?
Right.
Look at this. This is another illustration of a horse in the kitchen, almost.
It is indeed, yes. That particular story with two chopped off legs.
Right here, right here. Like the half-skin steer.
Yeah.
Which was selected by... for the 100 best short stories by John Updike. It is a raw, tough, horrifying story.
That's funny, too.
And funny. But where does that come from within you?
That, I don't know. I can't answer that question, but I can answer part of it. That came by way of the Nature Conservancy, actually. Barry Lopez had urged them some years before to do this nice collection of essays. Writers would write essays, and they would publish it, and it would raise money for the Nature Conservancy. And they did it, and it was a success and wonderful. And Barry said, "Why don't you do that with fiction? You know, short stories." And they asked me, and I said, yes, the fiction was all to be based. Each one of the writers could choose a Nature Conservancy site, go to it, hang out, and draw some kind of thing, inspiration or whatever from the place, and then write a short story based on it. So I said, yeah, I'll be happy to do it if I can go to a Wyoming site. And there were three. And one of them was the Ten Sleep Preserve at the south end of the Bighorns. And I went there and lived in an old revenuer's cabin. He was a preacher on the weekends and a revenuer during the rest of the week during the 30s or the 20s. A revenuer
means someone who goes out and...
I'm sorry, he was a revenue evader. He was a bootlegger is what he was. So I stayed in his
I thought a revenue
cabin.
might be like a revenue agent who would go out hunting bootleggers.
No, this was the hunted.
This was the huntee.
The huntee. And that story came out of it. And when I had such a good time writing the story, I don't know. I just, tramped around, looked at things, went down the Billy Creek Trail and looked into the canyon. There's a river that goes underground. And it was working from the landscape, and these characters just fell out of the landscape.
Can we tell what the story is about?
Yes, we can.
All right, tell us the story.
I knew you were going to do that.
Or I'll tell it, but I'd rather you do because it's your story.
It's actually fairly complicated.
Right.
An elderly gentleman from Woolfoot, Massachusetts, or it seems from Woolfoot, Massachusetts, is called back to Wyoming to his brother's funeral. He left home 60 years before. And on the way back home, there are flashbacks to a story that was told in the home kitchen with the old man and this character's brother and his father all there by the father's girlfriend. And the subject of the story that she tells is an old Icelandic folk tale about a steer that was skinned, but only half skinned before the work was interrupted. And
because he went in to take a drink.
Yes, or something wonderful like that. And the steer laid a heavy curse on the whole family. So
Escape.
That's the story within the story.
So the steer is hung up and escapes.
Yes, he leaves the steer lying or hanging,
right.
comes out and it's gone and disappears. So this story that was told 60 years before in the kitchen comes back to circle around in an odd and disquieting way and to make this story of the old man's return from Woolfoot, Massachusetts to Wyoming. It's not an easy story to tell just off the cuff.
Yeah, but it gives a sense of what we're talking about.
Because it's a story within.
What is it you admire about cowboys?
Nothing.
Really? You just find them interesting?
Well, actually, there are very few cowboys in there. It's I look more at ranchers, I think.
I'm using the term in a broader term.
Right.
Okay, redefine to ranchers. What is it you admire about people who live and inhabit ranches?
The thing is, again, the place. People are self-reliant. They're able to do things. They're competent. They're in tune with the country and the surrounding. They make a very tough place to make a living work, just barely. And I like that kind of self-reliance. But once again, what I'm doing is writing about place. And the characters carry the story.
I know you say that. The characters come out of place for you.
Yeah, they do. Uh-huh.
You choose place, but what about story? The story comes out of place too, or does the story begin and that gives you place, which gives you character?
No, the story comes first, and from place comes the economic situation, which is really what moves most people's lives, how they make their livings or don't make their livings. It's pretty simple. That's just the basis of what I write. You know, here's this place. It's got such and such. It's got mountains. It's got seashore. It's got this. People have to make their living doing this, this, and this, and somehow the story's there.
Okay, but you will grant me that lots of people start with a character in their head. There is someone on some kind of journey.
Truly so. Yeah. But I come to it, I guess, by a back door or something. It's just it's really an edge situation in terms of cultural and social profiles that intrigues me, probably from the study of history. And it's the place, the prevailing character of a particular rural situation, and the story's always there.
How do you write? Would you early in the morning, late at night?
Oh yeah,
with a longhand, with a typewriter.
I get up in the middle of the night and write. The best
really?
times for me are from 3 a.m. to about 7. Watching the light come up, and there are a lot of sunrise scenes and first light scenes in my writings. And
it sort of seeps through your eyes into your brain.
Right. I can look out my window and see an old antelope who lies up on a hillside nearby, and in the morning's early light, he gradually becomes visible. So I sort of have an antelope clock for gauging the time. But
and this antelope makes its way into your stories.
He hasn't yet. No.
Oh, he's got to. Come on. You see him every morning. It would be only fair.
I see a lot of things every morning that are not going into my stories.
Why? Because?
No, I was just remembering that we started to talk about that cover and why it's regarded differently in East and West.
I'm glad you brought me back to that.
And it's kind of important. I forgot it myself, and I just noticed. Someone in the East will look at this and say, this is a landscape with snow and a horse, and it's obviously Western, and it's beautiful.
Right.
But somebody in the West will see that, and an involuntary shudder will go down their spine because it means very big trouble. Something tragic has happened. That's a saddled, bridled horse standing in a dangerous landscape, and there's no rider. Something has happened to the rider. The horse looks cold and lonely. And when you see that kind of situation in the West, it means there's a problem somewhere. Yeah. So that speaks to a Westerner in a much different way than it does to an
almost
Easterner.
Romanticism versus reality, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. The first thing my first thought of when I saw it was, where is the rider? Not so much that the rider's in trouble, but where is the rider?
Well, you ride, so that's the good response, or the response I think that Willie wanted to evoke.
You're also known, and I wonder where this comes from, for the economy of word that you use. I mean, you are a very precise and economic writer.
You wouldn't say that if you saw the first draft or the second or third.
So we have an editor to thank for this, or what? And you're the editor.
Yeah.
Are you edited much?
No, I'm not edited much, at least not by my editors, but I myself am pretty savage, and these things went through a lot of drafts, 20, 30, and more drafts, yeah. Because I have a problem with cramming too much into the pages, always trying to stuff more stories and more characters and more events and more of everything in, I've had to develop some kind of a scalpel response to my own work, and that's just a...
Was it painful for you to do?
No, but it's tedious.
More tedious and painful? I mean, after you come up with what might be some very good lines,
right,
and a good story, a good paragraph.
Right.
But if you become, I mean, what is it in your head?
You have to learn to throw things away. You've got to throw it all away unless it really works.
You have to say to yourself, what? You put yourself in the head of the reader?
No, keep yourself in the head of the writer, and what Hemingway called the built-in you-know-what detector.
Yeah. It's a four-letter word, begins with S.
Yes, and ends with T. And you have to be aware of that. What's indulgent, what goes over the edge, and you have to stop short of that point and exercise a lot of control over it, particularly in the short story. You don't have room to swing dead cats around. So you've got to...
swing dead cats around. Is that a Western expression?
No.
Yeah, Hemingway was famous for editing. I mean, I think I read where he once said, "I've never written anything that I hadn't rewritten 32 times."
It's if you're going to pare it down and write concisely and tightly, which I think short stories request by their very nature, you just do it. You just have to do it. Just scrape away and scrape away. It's like making a piece of furniture.
Do you write with a computer, typewriter, longhand?
With a felt-tip pen and piles of paper and old envelopes and whatever comes to hand. And
why have you resisted technology?
No, I haven't. I put it on the computer in the afternoon. You know, it's just print it out and then revise and go back again. But the speed of the computer, here's where the problem with writing on the computer is. It's so easy, and one becomes so facile that you're apt to fall into cliches. I mean, they just pour out, this stuff. But if you're writing by hand, with your tongue stuck in the corner of your mouth, very slowly and earnestly, building the architecture of a story, there is a thing like physical drawing. If you sat down to draw a building or a landscape or something on a piece of paper, it's just like writing a story, only you're using words instead. So I end up with a piece of manuscript that's got arrows and towers and double boxes with little fringes and all that sort of thing, and reminders to haul this away. And
so a story is like a building. It has an architecture for you.
Truly does, and I think it does for most writers too. And perhaps I'm a little more conscious of it because I've been scraping away, removing the words until you get it down just so the sentence can barely stand on its legs.
Have you written your best work yet? Do you think? I mean, do you think that?
God, I hope not.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, does it get? How is writing this different than writing shipping news?
Oh, massively different, not only in terms of place, here we are again with that, but because they're short stories, and because I was trying to use a very compressed kind of medium. And it just is. I had, I think, probably more fun writing shipping news.
Why?
And just because it's a different kind of story. It was a funnier kind of story. And these are harder pieces and more realistic pieces, and that was deliberate. It's nice to switch your tone now and then. I hope to God I haven't written the best thing I can write.
I asked that because exactly that's the reason I asked. Is that you feel a sense of the learning craft for you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Straight up. Are you influenced by what you? If you're a great reader, you're obviously influenced by what you read in terms of you look at you look at the architecture of writing.
I do, and this is not something I think that's deliberate in your eye when you're reading. But it seeps in after you read enough, and God knows I've read a very great deal from the time I was a little kid.
Who's influenced you the most? Or among them?
Yeah,
among them.
I can't say, because I don't know.
Among them you can't say.
No, I haven't. Actually, I have a list, but it's a very long list. It has at least 90 names on it. That's my, briefless when I'm asked this question, and they made me leave it in the other room. I had this, big, thick wad of manuscript. Let me read my list.
Do you want to write nonfiction?
I did write nonfiction for a long time, and I still occasionally
as
do.
a journalist.
Yeah,
part.
right. I still occasionally snap back into that mode and do a little tiny piece. But actually, the fiction is so pleasant to do because you can lie all the time. I mean, you can just invent things, forget the footnotes.
Well, invent is better than lie, because most people think that through fiction you can get closer to the truth.
Yes, well, that's what we say.
You rolled your eyes in incredulity, did you?
Oh, it could be that through life we're getting closer to fiction. No.
I thank you for coming.
Oh,
it's
my
a great pleasure to have you. Mine. Don't get up yet. I just want to. I just find the cover remarkable. I mean, I really do. I think if you are in part responsible with Will for doing this, then more power to both of you, and for the publisher for an illustrated.
I can't tell you how pleased I was when my editor, Nan Graham, said, yes, we're going to do it.
I also want to show you, if this doesn't look like a Wyoming person, I don't know what does.
Oh, that's the V-Bar Dude Ranch in the background, just down the road.
All right. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Close Range Wyoming Stories by Annie Proulx. We'll be right back. Stay with us.